And then finally, youth ministry focuses on confirmation as well as conversion. We just kind of wanted to include Lutherans in this a little bit. A number of the Lutherans are going, what a great point this is. Let me tell you what this really means, because it has nothing to do with the words. I just put it in there. But what it means is this. No, it means that you and I, first of all, hear the voice of God in our lives. But then comes the confirmation. And the confirmation is the call. And I talked earlier about the fact that somehow we've got to help kids discover what their gifts are in a culture that tells people they have no gifts. We worship technology, and most of the jobs that most of us have rob us of our gifts, deny our gifts, don't allow us to use our individuality, our uniqueness, and our gifts. I heard of somebody who got fired at McDonald's because they took the ketchup and made a happy face on the Big Mac. They're out of here. We don't make happy faces. That uses too much ketchup. You do it the right way. I'm telling you, that's just a little tip of the iceberg. You and I all know what that's like. You work in an office, a lot of you, and you know how there's certain office behavior. You go to restaurants, you go out to eat, you know there's certain ways to behave. And I believe our job is to let kids see, I'm sorry, this culture is all locked up. This culture is constipated. This culture has no life. This culture is completely all picked up. It has no sense of the power and passion of the gospel and of Christ coming in and calling you to something, and suddenly within you, all your gifts that you didn't even think about suddenly come. In fact, they have a new, it's not new, it's been around a long time, called depth psychology. You know what depth psychology really is? It's telling people to go back to their childhood and remember what they like to do. That's all. And you know what? When you and I go back and remember what we like to do, that usually tells us what we're being called to do. And our job is to help kids listen and hear the call of God on their lives. That's what we're about. There's an old poem. I don't know if you guys remember this. It's called The Touch of the Master's Hand. About an auction where they had this old junky-looking violin, and they bring the violin up there, and it's all dusty and moldy, and they kind of hold it up and go, how much am I bid? And $1. Now there's $2. Somebody bid $3, and that's about it. And this old man, he kind of walks up to the front, grabs the violin out of the auctioneer's hand, and begins to play this most incredible concerto. And when he gets all done, the man holds the thing up, and now the bidding starts at $1,000, $2,000, who'll give me $3? And then the end of the poem, it goes, what made the difference? The touch of the master's hand. Now, that's always been interpreted as, of course, God, Jesus, is the master. And he comes along, and he makes that violin suddenly have life. And that's, I'm sure that's probably the legitimate interpretation of that poem, whatever you want to say. But I got another one. I mean, it's worth a try. How do we know? The guy's dead. Nobody, he's not going to know. Maybe I'm right. Maybe it's my poem. Maybe I made it up. Anyway, what if, think about it this way, where you're sitting in the audience and somebody's up there and they've got this old violin, and you look at that violin and you go, God, when I was a kid, there used to be a violin laying around the house, and I always remember, I kind of pick it up and and you kind of get up and you walk up to the front, you say, excuse me, can I take a look at that for a minute? And you take the violin and you put it under your chin, and it just seems to fit perfectly. And you realize that your fingers are long, and that you're able to bend them in such a way that you can actually hit those strings and clearly and not override on the other ones. And you begin to take the bow, and you can't play, but you realize, God, I wish I could play. Man, there's something about this violin that this feels like what I want to do. And all of a sudden you realize, I'm going to take lessons. I'm going to learn how to do this. There's something about playing the violin that touches base with something very deep in me. That's what youth ministry is about. It's helping kids get a hold of that violin. It's helping them to discover what it is that they do that's really good. Where are the poets in our culture? Where are the dancers? Where are the writers? Where are the sculptors? Where are they? Youth group is the place where we ought to be producing them like mad, because we get these kids in touch with their real gifts, with what they can do, and the power of a life that can make such a powerful, powerful difference. Well, it's time to go, and I want to close with one of my favorite stories by Robert Fulghum. It's in his book, Uh-Oh. Do you remember when you were in kindergarten? or first grade and second grade. And the teacher would get up one day and she'd go, "And now, boys and girls, it's time for the annual Christmas play," or "It's time for the spring play." Do you remember what happened immediately? Everybody in the place would put up their hands. And she would get up and say, "And we're going to do Cinderella." Everybody's got their hands up. "I want to be Cinderella. I want to be the handsome prince. I want to be the stepmother. I want to be the..." And all the parts are taken before you can even know what happened. Well, this happened in a classroom that Fulgham happened to be observing, and everybody had a part except for one kid. His name was Norman. He was fat, and he was shy, and the kids kind of ignored him. And basically, everybody raised their hands. He never raised his hand, and by the time he got around to thinking about it, everybody had been chosen. So the teacher looked at Norman, and she said, "Well, Norman, who are you going to be?" "Well," said Norman, "I'm going to be the pig." "Pig? There's no pig in Cinderella." Norman looked at her and said, "Well, there is now." As it turned out, Norman gave himself a walk-on part. The pig walked along with Cinderella wherever Cinderella went, ambling along on all fours in a piggy way, in a costume of his own devising, pink long underwear complete with trapdoor rear flap, pipe cleaner tail, and a paper cup for a nose. He made no sound. He simply sat back on his back haunches and observed what was going on like some silently supportive Greek chorus. The expressions on his face revealed the details of the dramatic action. He looked worried, sad, anxious, hopeful, puzzled, mad, bored, sick, or pleased as the moment required. There was no doubt what was going on, and no doubt that it was important. One look at the pig, and you knew. The pig was so earnest, so sincere, so very there. At the climax, when the prince finally placed the glass slipper on the prince's foot, and the ecstatic couple hugged and rode off happily ever after, the pig went wild with joy, danced around on his hind legs, and broke his silence by barking. In rehearsal, the teacher had tried to explain to Norman that even if there was a pig in Cinderella, pigs don't bark. But as she expected, Norman explained, "This pig barks." And the barking, she had to admit, was very good. The presentation at the Teachers Conference was a smash hit. At the curtain call, guess who received a standing ovation? Of course, Norman the barking pig, who was, after all, the real Cinderella story. Boy, I want to tell you something. That's not just a story. This culture says to every one of these young people, there are no pigs in this story, and there's no barking pigs in this story. And let me tell you, we'll tell you what you can be and what you can't be. And Jesus comes along, and God comes along and says, "Wrong. You don't even know what the story's about." And Jesus Christ, through his Holy Spirit, comes into the lives of these kids, and all of a sudden, the world is standing on its feet at what God can do through the lives of these young people. What a calling we have. What a calling and what a privilege. I have one of my favorite stories is about going to a track meet. All my kids ran track. And again, I know there's some kids here, and I hate to disillusion kids, but I'm going to tell you something your parents have never told you, and that is that track meets are boring. I have 5 children. 4 of them have run track, and it is 5 hours long. It's a 2-hour drive, half the time to get there, and 2 hours to get back. Your kid's in a 30-second race. Somebody asks you a question, you turn around and answer it, your kid's done. You got 2.5 more hours to go. I was at a junior high track meet. I don't know why they have track meets for junior high kids, because their hormones are all messed up. I mean, so you got kids out there running that are, little kid, "Yeah, just a minute," they're running right behind them. And it was the mile race 4 times around the field, which is a lot for a junior high kid. And I wasn't all that interested. I don't even remember why I was at the track meet. I just know I was sitting there, and I looked down, and it was the last lap because I could hear everybody cheering. And then I looked down, and I saw why, because they were just coming around the final turn, and there was these 2 guys, and they were like neck and neck, and they were coming right down the finish line and just going back and forth, and so people were kind of screaming. And then there was about a 10-foot break, and then the rest of the pack. But then I looked, and about half a lap back was this little short, fat kid. His name was Norman. No, but he's way around the other end of the track. And he is humiliated. I mean, he's so far behind, it's unbelievable. And, junior high kids, I mean, it's a disaster. And he's just walking as fast as he can. His head is down. His face is all red. You can see the blood kind of pumping in it. The coach must have just grabbed him at the last minute and said, Jones, you're running. And I don't think the kid had ever run a mile, walked one, let alone run one. He's kind of walking as fast as he can. All of a sudden, the crowd goes crazy as the first two cross the finish line. Then there's a break. Then everybody cheers for the rest of them. He's still now a quarter of a lap behind. I must have been sitting next to his mother because this woman stands up. She runs down to the railing. She leans over the railing, and she looks at the little boy down as he's coming down the final hill, and she goes, Johnny, run faster! Now, if you're Johnny, you got to be going, right, Mom, I forgot. I'm an idiot. Okay. You know what Johnny's doing? Johnny's thinking inside of him, I am running as fast as I can. You come to a seminar like this, and what happens? The speaker gets up here and goes, run faster! And you're all sitting out here going, I'm running as fast as I can. I can't go any faster. I'm as fast as I possibly can go. So what I want to do is to help relieve you of that pressure and of that tension today, and to kind of help us to realize this incredible conspiracy of grace that you and I are involved in. This thing that takes the legitimate part of us, the illegitimacy, and makes it legitimate. I pastor a church. In fact, I'm leaving this afternoon so I can get back so that I can preach tomorrow morning. I don't have to worry because I won't start working on my sermon until tomorrow morning. But I pastor a little church, and I always tell people about that. I've been doing it for about 6 years. And I joke about it because it's not a real church. You know what I mean? I mean, it's kind of like a Kmart church. I'm sort of like the blue light special. I mean, I didn't go to seminary. I got kicked out of 2 Bible schools that I went to. The church is not associated with any denomination. They wouldn't want to. It's called Grace Community Church. It just meets in a Grange Hall, and it's for people who don't like to go to church. And one of the guys goes to our church, for example, because he said, you don't wear socks. I do in Minneapolis, but I don't anywhere else. Now, I don't think you'd learn that in seminary. Don't wear socks to reach a particular group of people. But the fact is, we have this kind of bizarre little church, and it's just kind of a hokey little church. I mean, it's not a real thing, and I'm always embarrassed about it. I mean, when I'm with real ministers, I always try to explain to them, well, I'm not a real one. I'm just kind of a hokey one, And a friend of mine was getting ordained. His name is Ted Broadway, and he's getting ordained in the Presbyterian Church up in Medford, Oregon. He called me about a year ago and said, Mike, would you come to my ordination? And I said, sure, I'd love to. My roots are in the Presbyterian Church, and I love that kind of thing, and I love this guy. He goes to Mexico with us, so I went. And it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The place is packed out. And 10 minutes into the service, it's like an AT&T commercial. The guy gets up to give the charge. You know what the charge is? You invite a friend of yours who's in the ministry already, and he preaches a sermon to you in front of everybody else. And it's kind of like, here's what I've learned. Now that I've been in the ministry a while, let me give you some lessons on what you don't want to do and some of the things that you might want to do. I'm listening to this guy. I'm starting to cry. I have no idea where these tears are coming from. My wife told me later she knew exactly what was going on, but I had no idea. We get to the end of the service, and they did a really neat thing. They asked Ted to come forward, and it was kind of similar to this place, and they had him get down on his knees in front of the congregation. And then they said, everyone in the church who is a minister, would you please come forward and lay your hands on Ted, and we're going to pray for Ted. Tears started up again. I know exactly why I was crying now. Because I wasn't a real minister. I was a hokey minister. I didn't have all the credentials all these people had, and the tears were coming because Ted was getting everything I wanted. He had the piece of paper, he had the recognition, he had the acceptance from the denomination. He was a real minister. I did not belong there. And so, of course, I sat there. There were about 15 ministers in the congregation. They all got up and came forward, and they put their hands on Ted, and And Ted was on his knees, and he began to kind of look around the crowd. And all of a sudden, he came and he caught my eye, and he stopped. And I'll never forget what Ted Broadway did that day. He winked. He looked at me, and he winked. And then he took his head and went. And Ted Broadway was Jesus for me that day. Ted Broadway was saying to me, Mike, you're a minister. You're legitimate. Jesus made you that way. Get up here. I mean, don't sometimes you begin to feel like, what am I doing here? I'm not sure I really belong here. I hope every one of you today will see the wink of Jesus. I hope every one of you in this room, somewhere along the way, in this 2-hour time that we're together, has heard Jesus whisper to you, get up here. Look at me. Look at me winking at you. You're okay. You're legitimate. I made you that way. And I really, really believe that. And I hope that you'll sense that as we go through the day. So I want to give you some characteristics that I think determine whether or not you ought to be in youth work. There's a lot more I could give. I'm going to give you just a few. The first is helplessness. The first great quality of a youth worker is a sense of helplessness. Where you and I, there's another word for it, by the way, it's called humility. But for every one of us in this room, I hope you have that deep sense of, I'm in over my head. I'm with these kids. I'm not really sure I should be here. I'm not really sure that I, can do this. And so the result is that you kind of sit there and you begin to wonder, what in the world gives me the right to do this? And it is the sense that I don't have the right to do this. It is the sense, I'm not sure I can really pull this off. I'm not sure I'm the right person to be able to do this. I'm not sure I've got all the qualities. When some of you looked around this room today and you saw these other youth workers during the break, don't you get intimidated? Come on, be honest. Good-looking guys, good-looking gals, young, energetic, creative, fun, and you're sitting there, you're 50, you're 60, maybe even be 70, and you're looking at them going, oh boy, I think I'll resign. What in the world have I got to offer these kids? It's that sense of helplessness that is what the Bible calls humility, which is what you and I need in order to work with young people. It is the deep sense of, oh God, please, I am over my head. I don't know what to do. Let me just, I don't know what else to do. Mrs. Lindsay, I still remember her. She taught junior church 45 years ago when I went to the Presbyterian church. She wore the same dress every Sunday. She weighed over 300 pounds. I don't think she knew any of our lingo, any of our language. She wasn't cool. She didn't listen to any of our music. All I know is that woman left an impact on my life I'll never forget. There was just something about her. She just loved me. You folks here, you're sensing, I don't know if I've got the skills. Oh, yes, you do. The fact that you don't know that you've got them tells me you've got them. I worry when I run into youth workers and they go, I am cool. These kids are lucky I'm on God's side. I could be on Satan's side, but no. I want to tell you something. Every one of us ought to walk into the kind of shaking. Rich Van Pelt always talks about a minister that he knows, that the church put one of those bronze little things on his pulpit right in front where he puts his notes, so he had to deal with this little plaque. And the plaque said, what are you doing to these people? I like that. I mean, when I preach every Sunday morning, I get up there and I think to myself, what am I doing up here? The only reason that I'm even allowed to be up here is because I can speak. But there are people in my church who know more about Jesus in their little finger than I'll ever know in my life. But I'm the one who's up here, and they're the one who's sitting there. I feel totally out of place and totally like, I don't know, this is scary stuff what I'm doing with these people. I hope we all feel that way. We don't need any more cocky, arrogant people in the church. We got enough of them. Youth workers that just kind of have this attitude like, man, I am so cool, and these kids are just so lucky. Oh, man, I'd rather have a complete Mr. Nerd of the universe than have somebody like this who thinks that they're just so unbelievable. And it isn't, it's humility. You ever, I'm sure that no one here is like this, but do you all know, and I know if they are here, it's going to do everything you can to look at them. So don't. And I'll see you with the stiff neck, and I'll know they're sitting next to you, so I'll look at them. But I mean, do you all know the youth work, the person who's volunteered to be with the kids, who that just got out of the military? And it's like, I'll teach these kids what the gospel's about. I'm going to show them that Jesus never wore an earring. These kids, they've had it. I love these kids. By God, they're going to serve Jesus. Aren't those people a little scary? They kind of ought to be in therapy, not in the youth group. We've all met those kind of people. But you know what? I'll even take that. I'll even take someone who just, because that's kind of who they are, and they just kind of blunder in, and they do it the best they can, and they just, they make all these mistakes. Yeah, that's what I want. It's time for the church to start making mistakes again. The thing I'm having trouble with all this stuff that's going on nowadays with these giant big church growth things and all these big huge new churches with all their unbelievable musical groups, their incredible drama groups, is that all of us just have to sit around and look at them. Because they're all so good and we're so bad. I'm tired of it. It's about time we had some flaws somewhere. We made some mistakes. We made some risks. We failed. That's why I think it's so important to get kids involved in the whole life of the church. They ought to be on the boards. We ought to try to get our kids snuck on those boards. Man, they would have saved so many churches so much. Can you imagine how we're going to build an organ? That's going to cost $300,000. Okay, well, high school kid. How much did you say that was? $300,000. $300,000 for an organ? Geesh. You guys been to Price Club? I got a synthesizer. Rent it from me, $50 a week, push organ. I'm telling you, it would be amazing. You get kids up there preaching, and they're just preaching away, and they're saying all these statements with such authority, and they know everything, and they know what's right and what's wrong. And if you people aren't witnessing, you don't love Jesus, and they're saying all this stuff, and adults are getting mad. Good. At least they're awake. At least they're alive. They're walking out of church going, who was that kid? It's your son, honey. Oh, okay, yeah, I know that. From a distance, it's hard to recognize. I mean, the fact is, we got to get these kids involved in the total life of the church, and we've got this humility that is so lacking in the Christian faith. It's time that you and I recognize that this arrogance and we make mistakes like crazy. That's what characterizes youth ministry. I am sick and tired of churches hiring youth workers anymore who are mistake-free, sanitized. They always have to go to a board meeting and apologize. I'm sorry, we spilled coffee on the Jones Memorial carpet. Well, we just can't. We're going to have to make a rule from now on, no refreshments in the Jones Memorial carpet room. There's a room in a church in this town, in a church, I've seen it. They have this unbelievable wood parquet floor. It must have cost $40,000. And on top of that is a Persian rug that cost another $30,000, and nobody's allowed to meet in it. You just walk by it. Look at that. It's a Persian carpet. There's wood underneath there somewhere. That's a sin. I'm sorry. It's a sin. It's a waste of God's money. What is going on here? When you take a job, when you work with a youth group, I hope you walk into the board and you go, look, I fail. I'm going to make mistakes. This youth group is going to make lots and lots of mistakes. If I make the same one twice, fine, but I'm going to make them, and we're going to make good ones. We're going for it. They walk in there and they go, you spilled punch on the Jones Memorial carpet. Okay, that's it. I want you to look at them and go, what? What are you talking about? I thought that's why you bought this room. I thought that's why you put the room together, so we could have meetings in it. We had 50 kids in that room. Woohoo! They spilled punch on the floor. Woohoo! Our job is to replace that carpet in 3 years. We're going to have stains, rips, tears, everything. That's what happens when you have people. They fall over. They break things. These are kids. They got hormones. They bump into things. They fall down. They do that. Yes! I'd much rather have them doing that than not here and a clean carpet. You better believe it. And so when they come to you and say, you spilled something on the carpet, you go, you're welcome. Of course I make mistakes with their kids. I'm going to do things that I can't believe I did that. I can't believe we made that mistake. But that's the way we learn. It's risky to do youth work. We can all get sued. We live in an absolutely sue-happy culture. Of course, we want to be careful as best we can. But look, we take kids to Mexico over the last 8 years. Every year, I just, when we cross the border, I just go, oh, thank you. Nobody died. Nobody got hurt. Nobody, I mean, it's terrible. And it's much safer not to go to Mexico. We just can't allow this culture to dictate to us what we can and can't do. And more than that, how else do you learn how not to fail? I mean, I taught all my kids to walk, and you know what happens when they're a baby. You get about 9 months old, ready to go. Well, the first one. And first one's 6 months old. You go, this kid's a genius. I know they can walk. Go. But when you finally get ready, you get grandma. She's got the camera. You're over there. You got the little baby up by the arms. You let the baby go. Takes about 2 or 3 steps and falls down. Now, when it does, you don't go, oh, nice job. Now get up and do it again and don't fall down. Your grandma didn't even have the camera going yet. Now do it. No. I mean, look, how do you tell a 9-month-old baby their head is heavy? You just let them go, and they kind of got their head, and they go, okay, I'm not doing that anymore. I'll just kind of lean it back. Go. And finally, they look over at grandmother, and they go, oh, I get it. You kind of wiggle it around in the middle. All right, I got it. Kids learn how to walk by falling down. They learn how to get their balance by losing their balance. When we've got a bunch of young people and we're dealing with the gospel and we're dealing with all this stuff, they're going to take risks, they're going to do wild things, they're going to make mistakes, they're going to fail. What a great place for us to have that happen, but in the church. I, as I said, took a group of kids to Mexico, and we went down there and we had a bunch of kids, and 2 o'clock, we bring a lot of non-Christian kids down there. About 2 o'clock in the morning, one morning, I wake up. I hear some kid yelling the F word louder than you can ever imagine. And he is very creative. And he is just yelling this word out. I mean, I come flying out of my tent. I rush over. I quiet him down. I rush back to the tent, get my clothes on. Rush back out there again. I said, Brian, what is going on? Well, what went on was that at 2 in the morning, a group of kids got up in another tent and decided to raid the tent on the other side of camp. They came running by his tent. His head was up against the side of the tent. He was sleeping, and a kid kicked him right in the head. He was sound asleep. Wham! He woke up. Those were the words that came out of his mouth. I said, son, you've got it. But anyway, no, I'm sitting there, and I'm looking at this kid, and this woman comes up to me. She's a counselor, and she goes, we need to talk. Okay. She's kind of conservative, so I know what's going to happen. We get alone. She goes, we can't let this kind of thing happen again. Oh, okay. What would you suggest we do about it? Put F-word detectors in the tents? I mean, when we get on the bus, we read one of the rules. If you get kicked in the head while asleep, do not use the F word when you wake up. This is going to happen. You can't control stuff like that. It just happens. That's part of the deal. We actually had groups around us complaining. It wasn't just her. It was other groups that heard this kid wake up. Like we're supposed to control this. And so finally I looked at her, and after I took a couple of deep breaths, I said, I really appreciate that. But I said, let me just say something to you. There's 800 kids at Wairika High School. 752 of those kids are not here. Brian's here. Isn't this great? What a great place for him to lose his temper. What a great place for him to get mad. What a great place for him to blow it. He was at our camp with people who love him and who support him and who care about him and who deal with him. And he came to me and went, I'm really embarrassed. What do you think I should do? I've been thinking maybe I should go apologize to each of the tents tonight. What do you think? Duh. Yeah. I didn't have to preach him a sermon on language. I didn't have to tell him that's really not appropriate. He's not stupid. He knew that. He went around and apologized on his own to say, hey, I was out of line. He wasn't a Christian. He just knew. We've got to allow kids the freedom and the space to be able to make mistakes, to blow it, to do something like that. Some kid gets up and gives a little talk or testimony, and they use a swear word, or they say something that's a little bit wrong. And everybody goes, didn't you check these things? Didn't you have a script? Well, as a matter of fact, yeah, I did. I kind of like that one. No. We can't control this. You and I have that sense of humility, and we have a place where kids are safe and where they're free to allow this to happen. That's so important. Another thing you got to have if you're going to work with kids, you got to like kids. I mean, I'm sorry. We can get spiritual all we want to. You just got to like kids. I'm going to be honest. There's a number of you here who've thought about giving up youth work as a volunteer and going back, in the regular church. But the thought of going back to adult Sunday school class is more than you can handle. Say, I'll take another year with these kids. The fact is that you got to like kids. I mean, there's something about a lot of you, the kids are ending up messing around and you're getting the giggles. They're in the back doing things and you're going, and everybody's looking at you. I mean, you've got to like kids to be in youth ministry. I know some people that don't like kids that work with them, and they are scary. They don't like their earrings. They don't like their music. They don't like the stuff that they listen to, and every time they come in, they get into big arguments and hassles with them about that stuff. The moment they walk in the door, what did you say? What kind of music is that? What are you doing? Why did you say that? You went and saw what movie? You like that video? How could you? Madonna. And right away, they're into it with these kids because they hate them. They don't like them. They don't like the youth culture. And they're going to fix these kids and get them not to be kids. Youth ministry is not helping kids not to be kids. In fact, youth ministry is helping kids to discover what it's like to be a kid. You know what we do? We create memories for kids. Nobody plays anymore. I mean, adults just don't play. Adults are too busy and too serious. So you and I have to come along, and we produce idea books with games in them, the egg and armpit relay. I thought you were all into helping kids with Jesus and all that kind of stuff. Sure we are, but we're also into helping kids be kids. And nowadays you can't be a kid. How many times have you gone to play a game and the kids go, we're not playing that game. It's stupid. I'm not going to look like an idiot. I'm not playing that game. No way. Why? Because our culture has told them all along, you want to start helping these kids to learn how to be little miniature grown-ups. Crying out loud. They're walking down the street. They're 9 years old. Pantyhose, the mess deals, the nails, the earrings, the whole deal. Then there's the girls. I mean, if you think about it a minute. Why is it that when we have camp, for example, why is church camp always the same way? First thing we do is we get all the kids on the bus. Now the rules. No drinking, no smoking, no drugs. Like these kids are complete idiots. They're on the bus going, what? No drugs? I'm out of here. What kind of a camp is this? Why do we make this big deal about all these rules? Why not make camp this incredible adventure where who wants to smoke, who wants to drink, who wants to do that? I mean, you can still, I'm a stickler for, I want kids to get a good night's sleep. I don't want them coming home sick. So by golly, we get up at 7, we go to bed at 11. That's it. I'm not a big deal. It doesn't matter. Yes, it does matter. I want these kids sleeping, but that doesn't mean I don't wake them up at 2 o'clock in the morning. Look at this. somebody has stuffed balloons inside my pillow. No wonder I couldn't sleep. Great, go back to sleep. Wait a minute. I've got these balloons. What am I going to do with them? I could fill them with air, but that's not any fun. Wait a minute. It's hot. I am really hot. Aren't you hot? By now, everybody else in the cabin's waking up. They're going, what's going on? Shut up. I said, wait a minute. If it's hot in our cabin, I'll bet you it's steaming in girls' cabin 13. Tell you what, let's fill these balloons with water, and let's go help cool off the girls in cabin 213. And the guys are all going, he's flipped out. Shut up, just do it. We'll say he made us do it, and they're tying them all up. And I say, I just happen to have this bugle with me. Now, here's what we're going to do. You know where cabin 13 is? We're going to crawl over there. We're going to bring the water balloons. We're going to surround the place. When you guys hear the bugle, we attack. These guys are all around the deal. That guys come flying up. They come running to the cabin. They're throwing things all around. It's empty. That's because I warned them we were coming. 2 seconds later, they hear another bugle. Dun, dun, dun! The girls come over the hill. Bam, bam, a giant water fight. I was at a deal. I suggested this idea. The next year, a youth worker was at one of these things, took me seriously, and they did it. And they had guys and girls separated, where the girls were over on one side of the camp, guys were over on the other. And they talked these guys into crawling across this meadow that was in between their two deals in the dark with their water balloons, bringing them over. They didn't know that the girls had been talking to the same thing, and they are crossing each other. Now, come on, what's going to happen when those kids get home? Do you think they're going to talk about Jesus? No way. You're not going to believe what happened. 2 o'clock in the morning, we're out there with water balloons, and we attacked this cabin. They weren't even there. It's unbelievable. Now, what happens after that? Everybody in the camp is up. That's right. So we all sit around the campfire. We sing a few songs. We go, oh, gosh, you know what? We need to take a little hike down by the river. They get down by the river. There's the cooks. They've all gone down there. They've got breakfast fixed. The kids eat breakfast right down by the stream. And then you say, hey, go back to bed. We've changed the schedule. We won't be having anything till noon. And just spend the rest of the day just kind of kicking back. Why not? That's what we're about. I remember being at a camp at Forest Home, California, and we had a junior high camp, and it was 110 degrees during the day. And so in the afternoon, we had a hike to Inspiration Point. 110 degrees, the junior high kids are griping and complaining. They come up over the hill. As they come down on Inspiration Point, out there on a table was watermelon, ice-cold watermelon. Now, what happened? The same thing that happens every time anybody has a camp and you have a bunch of kids all heading for the watermelon. All the adults immediately form the flanks, and they're all screaming at the top of their lungs, hold it! Get over there! Anybody touches a watermelon, that's it! You don't get any! Get up in a line, get one piece, put the seeds over there, put the rinds over there, don't throw any of them, eat them, and have a good time! So you know what we did? We changed that whole deal. There were 100 kids. We had 100 pieces of watermelon. We cut nice big chunks. And then we took those 100 pieces and we cut each one piece into 7 little pieces. So now we had to add tables because we had 700 pieces of watermelon. And we kept the watermelon in a freezer just before, so when they got up there, it was so cold it hurt their teeth. And when they came up over the hill, here were all these tables with pieces of watermelon everywhere. And what did we all do? We just got out of their way and went, all the watermelon you can eat! And the kids come flying down there and everything. We got seed spitting contests going on over here. We got rind smashing deals over there. We got big clubs and mallets that they can smash the thing and do all kind of thing. And these little kids are walking out there going, I got 7 pieces of watermelon. That's right, stupid, that's 1 piece. These kids had the biggest blast, and we changed the whole thing into a memory. Rather than it being something where we're yelling at them and negative about them, they had the most wonderful, exciting time. That's because we like kids. We like to see them have a good time. We like to see them enjoy it. I had a group of parents, 2 parents come to me, not a group. And they came to me and they said, our kid's 17 years old. He wears 2 earrings. He's into heavy metal music. He wears all black. He has black hair. Every time we come home, the music is playing full blast. He locks himself in his bedroom. And every time we come home, we both work. We're so mad that we're destroying our relationship with our kid. We don't know what to do. I said, I got an idea for you. I don't know if it'll work, but try it. So I said, I want you to come home tonight, both of you from work. You go and knock on his door. When he finally comes to the door, because he won't be able to hear you, When he finally opens the door, you go, shut the music off, get in the kitchen, sit down, and shut up. He's going to have a chip on his shoulder a mile long. He's going to walk in, sit down. Yeah, what? You and your wife sit down across from him, look him square in the eye, and go, Johnny, your mom and I are counting to 100. Now go hide. Can you see this kid at school the next day? He's going, you're not going to believe what happened. I played hide and seek till 3 o'clock in the morning with my parents. I still can't find them. I just have a feeling that something like that would just switch and turn the tables on what's going on there. Because the parents have gotten so mad and so upset about what the kid's doing that they've forgotten in some way to say, I like you. You know, you're a great kid. I love you. And so we've got to help kids do this. We've got to help them learn how to play, to have a good time, to kick back, to not be concerned about that, to create memories for kids where they actually can have a great time. The third characteristic that we can do with kids is to affirm them. We're in the affirmation business. I mean, who tells a kid they're neat? Who actually says to a kid, you are really a neat kid? And frankly, I think that's what most of us do. That's really what we're about. We say to kids, you are such a neat kid. I can't believe it. And when you and I do that, it's amazing what happens to a kid when they're told by somebody, an adult, you really are neat. This is really a great skill. They're under so much pressure and so much stress all the time to perform that somebody has to come along and say, that is really neat. I've got this gal that I've been meeting with once a week, once every other week or so, and she's in our Young Life Club. And she's really bright, and she's into Dungeons and Dragons, and she writes, she's really smart. And I happened to overhear her talking about some stuff that she'd written, and I said to her one day, could I see your poems? She said, well, yeah. She said, how did you even know I wrote them? I said, oh, I heard you mentioning them. She says, I've never let anybody read my poems. I said, well, I would love to read them. So finally, it took me a long time to coax her. She finally gave me her book of poems. And I read them. And then I took and I wrote a letter down. I just wrote her a letter telling her how great her poems were and then asking her about 3 or 4 questions that I was a little bit concerned about in her poems. And we had the greatest discussion. And she and I have kind of turned the corner on a relationship because she understands that I appreciate and admire what she's done with words. And I'm saying that for a lot of us here, it means a lot for these kids to realize that that's kind of what we're doing. We're adults. You know, there used to be the extended family. Well, there isn't an extended family anymore, so you and I have to kind of do that. We are in the ministry of grace, and so we are involved in a conspiracy of grace. I heard a great story. I love great stories, and even if they didn't happen, but this is a great story. Little guy playing Little League. I don't know if Little League's a big deal up here, but it is where I live. And, I mean, the parents are usually the problem. But it's like the finals for the 10-year-olds. I didn't even know you could have finals for 10 years old, but they got them. And it's a 7-inning game, as you know, and this little kid invites his entire family to come. Mom and dad, both sets of grandparents. He's got 3 brothers who are married. They all bring their wives, their little kids. I mean, the place is jammed. He's got uncles and aunts and grandpas and grandmas, and he's got a whole little section just for his family. It's the bottom of the 7th inning. Their team is up. There's 2 out. The bases are loaded, and guess who's up? The little guy with his family there. So the pitcher gets out there, and he pitches the first one, and the little kid swings, and he misses. And the whole family just goes, hey, that's all right, no problem. You can do it. Come on, keep your eye on the ball. You got them. They're panicking. We've got it. Just get a hit. Let them walk you. Don't worry about it. Pitches the ball again. Shoot. Strike 2. Okay, you can do it, Johnny. Come on. You can make this happen. You can do it. Don't you keep your eye on that ball. Don't just swing at anything. You can do it. Shoot. Strike 3. He's out. Game's over. Everybody walks off the field. All of his teammates refuse to even look at him. They just walk straight into the bleachers. The other keeps going crazy. They're having a great time, laughing and jumping and the whole thing. And the little boy is absolutely crushed. Can you imagine at 10 years old, all this pressure on you? He's just standing there. His bat's down on the ground. His tears are starting to form in his eyes. And all of a sudden he hears, Johnny, Johnny, come on, get up to bat. And he kind of looks up. His entire family is out in the field. His uncle's in center field. His other uncle's over in right field. His other's in left. His aunt is in shortstop. He's got first and second base covered. Grandparents are up there. His dad's pitching the ball. His grandpa's behind with it. He says, pick up the bat, Johnny, come on. So he picks up the bat. His dad pitches the ball. Choom, strike one. Choom, strike two. 15 times he misses. Finally, Dad pitches a really slow lob. Bam, the kid hits the ball. It goes right to center field. There's the uncle right there. The ball's coming right into his mitt. I don't know what happened. The sun must have kind of hit his glove or something. Just as the ball was about to hit it, boink, it bounced off the deal. And they go, run, Johnny, run. So he runs to first base. The uncle picks up the ball. He throws the ball to first base. It's coming right at the first baseman. No way is Johnny going to make it in time. When all of a sudden the sun, I don't know what happened, but it must have gone off the bald head of his uncle or something, and it glared, and he missed the ball, and he said, go to second, and he goes to second, and they go to third, and he goes third. By then they got the ball. They throw the ball to the third baseman. It's coming right at him, and again, something weird went on, and there was this kind of a glare, and the ball kind of gets lost, and he gets past third, and they go for home, go for home. He comes running into home. They pick up the ball. They throw the ball. It's about 10 feet over the catcher's head, and Johnny slides in safely. The next thing you know, somebody's grabbed him. They've thrown him up on their shoulders and all running around cheering and laughing and screaming for this little boy. And somebody who was there said, you know what? I just witnessed a conspiracy of grace. What a great thing. That's what we're about. That's what we do with kids. We're involved in this conspiracy of grace. We're putting these kids on our shoulders going, yes, way to go, nice, unbelievable, you did it. They didn't even know they could do it. It's so fun to take these kids to Mexico, and they don't even know how to hammer. And they get there, and the next thing you know, it takes them all day long because they hold the hammer way up close, right up at the top. It's like Woody Woodpecker, they're saying, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And then you say, no, if you hold it down at the other end, you kind of, it really makes a difference. You can get it in there in 3 or 4. And these kids, by the end of the week, they're kind of, hammering behind them. They had no idea because mom and dad never let them do anything. Some of you that have teenagers know what I mean. You watch your teenage kid walk in the house from the garage with a hammer, heading for his bedroom. What are you going to do? Where are you going? In my bedroom. What are you doing with that hammer? I was just going to hang up. Give me that hammer. You're going to go in there, knock a big hole in the wall. No way. These kids never get to use a hammer. They never get to do anything significant. You and I have got the opportunity to affirm these kids and to love these kids and to like them. Another thing you got to do to be in youth ministry, you got to have a sense of humor. I mean, you just do. You have to be able to laugh. You're overweight, they know it, and they've got a nickname for you. If you're sensitive and can't handle it, I'm sorry. Don't be in youth work. You're ugly, they know it. When you walk out of the room, they're going, whoa. They're cruel. They are. And you and I can get mad about it. And every once in a while, we do have to kind of nail them on some stuff that they do. But look, that's the way kids are. We just have to laugh. Have you ever seen these ads in Rolling Stone magazine for 501s? I mean, I never look at the magazine. I was at a friend's house. But the one where the guy has no shirt on, and he just has the 501s and no shoes, and he's just got this great body, this great upper body, and he's kind of got his arms folded like this, and he's sort of leaning up against a brick wall, and he's got his knee up like this, so the 501s are tight against him all the way down, So I bought a couple pair. What is so funny about that? So my daughter tells me you got to wash them a bunch of times, and I do all that, and I wear them to my Young Life Club. And I'm standing up there in front of a group of kids talking about Jesus, and I'm a pretty serious part of the talk, and Kathy Burton, little girl, sits about 3 rows back. All of a sudden, in the middle of my talk, she goes, hey, Yaconelli, turn around. I said, what? She said, turn around. I mean, that's the way kids are. I mean, they just interrupt you right in the middle of your talk. And if you're really uptight and everything, you go, I was talking about Jesus. But I have to admit, she kind of had my curiosity, and I thought, turn around. I said, and then I remembered I had my 501s on. I thought, all right. So I turned around, she goes, look, Yaconelli doesn't have a butt. Now, I can get mad at her. She was right, but the fact of the matter is that if you and I don't have a sense of humor, we will never make it in youth ministry. We got to laugh at these kids. There's just nothing else to do. And I have seen too many youth workers who get burnt out because they just can't laugh. And that's the final little thing I want to say to all of us before we have to go today, and that is that I want to talk about burnout for a minute. I want to talk about learning to say no, and I've got a couple principles for you that I hope will help you. See, I happen to think that burnout is your own fault. Don't go blaming it on your church. Don't blame it on your pastor. Don't blame it on your youth worker. It's your fault. If you're burnt out, it's because you're doing too much, and it's because you've decided to do too much. Now look, folks, think about it this way. Every single kid that comes to my youth work needs 24 hours of my time. I can't give them 24 hours. And some of you are going, yeah, right, I know, Mike, but I can only give an hour. Okay, here's the Yaconelli principle of youth ministry that has helped me survive forever. Something is better than nothing. You give an hour a week? All right! You're giving an hour more than 99.9% of the people in that church. But it's only an hour. But it's only an hour that nobody else is given. And you're giving it. Quit feeling bad about the 5 hours you're not giving and get thrilled about the 1 hour you are giving. You see, this comes from our fundamentalistic upbringing. I grew up in a deal where it said, if you pray for 2 minutes a day, you might as well not pray. Because God's up in heaven going, 2 minutes? 2 lousy minutes? Michael, get over here. Dissolve the hair in the middle of his head. And that's it. We don't understand God. When you and I pray for 2 minutes, God's up there going, listen to this. Yaconelli just prayed 2 minutes. Woohoo! I want you to know that we serve a God who is thrilled and excited about what we do, not about what we don't do. You're giving an hour a week. You're giving an hour a month. You're giving 12 hours a year, whatever it is. That's more than if you weren't giving it at all. Quit apologizing for what you're not doing. You could be giving 24 hours a day, but none of us can do that. So you have to draw the line somewhere. And draw that line and realize you cannot be the savior of these kids. There's only one Messiah, and you ain't it. You and I have got a Messiah. I'll give them an hour, and maybe that's not all that they could have if I were able to give them more time, but I at least are giving them an hour. Learn how to say no. Learn how to have boundaries. Learn how to take that phone off the hook and not let that phone dominate you at dinner time and at those kind of things. Be able to say no to that stuff. Don't be embarrassed about it. But what if a kid's in a crisis and they can't get a hold of me? I'm sorry. Life is like that. I'm on a trip somewhere and someone dies. I can't do the funeral. That's the way life is. I would love to do it. I wish I were there, but I'm not. And you and I have got to learn how to say no and how to understand that. And I say to couples, in fact, I don't understand it. Those are your volunteers. Now I'm going to make you mad. I don't care. I don't understand it. Why do churches, if you've got volunteers, especially if you live in Minnesota, everybody has a cabin somewhere by some lake. You're giving your time to that church. You're a volunteer. What if somebody walked up to you one Sunday morning and they showed up Friday night, and they went, here's the keys to our cabin. The pantry's stuffed with food. Here's the directions on how to get there. Here's our 2 teenage daughters. They're babysitting your kids. Get in the car. See you there. Don't go to church on Sunday morning. Don't feel guilty. You just stay in that cabin the whole time. Make love, drink wine, read your Bible, pray, do whatever you want. Don't come back until Sunday night. Have a great time. I have to tell you, if that just happened once, I think I'd go, I can do this. I can do this another year. I mean, why don't we appreciate what we have? It's so easy. It's so easy to realize what you are doing and to just take that time. And if they're not going to give it to you, then you take it. My wife and I, every once in a while, have what we call a day of decadence. I make no apologies for it. We check into a local motel, sets all kinds of rumors going. We check into a local motel. We get there at 8 o'clock in the morning. We just send our kids off to school. We stay there until 5 o'clock. We drink wine. We read books. We sit there and just lay back and sleep and do whatever else, which I don't need to go into. And then we go home at 5 o'clock. And the kids just get back from school, and we are ready to go. Back to the motel, but we're ready. What a great opportunity. You and I need to take that and not apologize. We have people come to our National Youth Workers Convention that we put on for 4 days. It costs $1,000 by the time they spend for their room and their airfare and registration and everything else. It's $1,000. And a lot of these youth workers come and their marriages are in shambles. But because the church has paid their way, they feel obligated to go to all 70 of the seminars and all 8 of the general sessions and go to every meeting and all the late night stuff and everything else. You know what we say to the first night? Some of you need to go up into your room, order room service. Do not leave your room until the very last second of the very last day. Don't go to any seminars. Just make love. Have a wonderful time with your wife. And on your way out, buy all the tapes of all the seminars and listen to as many as you can. Because you don't need any seminars. You need to be alone with your wife. And some of you in this room, we just need to say, look, our wives and husbands put up with a lot, so we're taking this next weekend off. Kids, we're not having a youth meeting. You know why? Because I'm spending the day with my wife. And we're just going to be alone, and we're not doing youth group. Sorry, so it's all, time's all yours. Have a good time. What's wrong with that? Why can't we do that? And you and I need to be able to take that time. Well, I want to finish by reading you probably one of my favorite has become my favorite story. The Tale of the Three Trees. Before I do that, though, I have to read you my other favorite thing that summarizes kind of what I've said. It was written by a rabbi. I just think youth workers are the kind of people that you can't trust. You never know if they've got a whoopee cushion, what's going on. We've got a youth worker sitting in the back, he's juggling. He's just sitting back there juggling. I mean, that's what I like. I like that. Wouldn't it be great in church on Sunday morning if your pastor's sitting there right in the middle of the congregation, there's a guy juggling? Let's shake him up a little bit, wouldn't it? Point number one, number two. What? I think we're kind of whimsical, spontaneous, wonderful people to be around. In fact, I love my kids to be around people like you because I let them know that they're adults who really know how to have fun. They haven't become boring. And this rabbi wrote about what he thinks life ought to be like. See what you think. I like this. I think this characterizes who we are. Life is tough. Takes up a lot of your time. All your weekends. And what do you get at the end of it? I think the life cycle is backward. You should die first. Get that out of the way. Then you live 20 years in an old age home. You get kicked out when you're too young. You get a gold watch and you go to work. You work 40 years until you're young enough to enjoy your retirement. You go to college. You party until you're ready for high school. See what kind of crowd we have here. You go to grade school. You become a little kid. You play. You have no responsibilities. You become a little baby. You go back into the womb. You spend your last 9 months floating, and you finish up as a gleam in somebody's eye. You know, A.W. Tozer said a long time ago, this culture has put out the gleam in people's eye. See, Jesus Christ comes on, he keeps that twinkle in our eye, that little gleam in our eye, that little mischievous look. We're always up to something. That's our calling. That's who we are. And I think this book, even though it's a Christmas story, it's more than that. This book illustrates really what our calling is all about and what God is doing through all of us in this room. I wish I could show you all the pictures. They're absolutely marvelous, but we'll just end with this little story. I love reading stories. Isn't it funny that when you're old enough to finally understand little stories like this, they quit reading them to you? You know, I mean, high school kids love stories like this because they finally understand them. But we quit reading them. Well, they're high school kids. They love them, and they love the pictures. Anyway. Once upon a mountaintop, 3 little trees stood and dreamed of what they wanted to become when they grew up. The first little tree looked up at the stars twinkling like diamonds above him. I want to hold treasure, he said. I want to be covered with gold and filled with precious stones. I will be the most beautiful treasure chest in the world. The second little tree looked out at the small stream trickling by on its way to the ocean. Not me. I want to be a strong sailing ship, he said. I want to travel mighty waters and carry powerful king. I will be the strongest ship in the world. The third little tree looked down into the valley below where busy men and busy women worked in a busy town. I don't want to leave this mountaintop at all, she said. I want to grow so tall that when people stop to look at me, they will raise their eyes to heaven and think of God. I think I will be the tallest tree in all the world. Years passed, the rains came, the sun shone, and the little trees grew tall. One day, 3 woodcutters climbed the mountain. The first woodcutter looked at the first tree and said, "This tree is beautiful. It's perfect for me." With a swoop of his shining axe, the first tree fell. "Now I shall be made into a beautiful chest," thought the first tree. "I shall hold wonderful treasure." The second woodcutter looked at the second tree and said, "This tree is strong. It's perfect for me." With a swoop of his shining axe, the second tree fell. "Now I shall sail mighty waters," thought the second tree. "I shall be a strong ship fit for kings." The third tree felt her heart sink when the last woodcutter looked her way. She stood straight and tall and pointed bravely to heaven, hoping he wouldn't cut. But the woodcutter never even looked up. "Any kind of tree will do for me," he muttered. With a swoop of his shining axe, the third tree fell. The first tree rejoiced when the woodcutter brought him to a carpenter's shop, but the busy carpenter was not thinking about treasure chests. Instead, his work-worn hands fashioned a tree into a feed box for animals. The once beautiful tree was not covered with gold or filled with treasure. He was coated with sawdust and filled with hay for hungry farm animals. The second tree smiled when the woodcutter took him to a shipyard. But no mighty sailing ships were being made that day. Instead, the once strong tree was hammered and sawed into a simple fishing boat, too small and too weak to sail an ocean or even a river. He was taken to a little lake. Every day he brought in loads of dead, smelly fish. The third tree was confused when the woodcutter cut her into strong beams and left her in a lumberyard. What happened, the once tall tree wondered. All I ever wanted to do was stay on a mountaintop and point to God. Many, many days and nights passed. The 3 trees nearly forgot their dreams. But one night, golden starlight poured over the first tree as a young woman placed her newborn baby in a feed box. "I wish I could make a cradle for him," her husband whispered. The mother squeezed his hand and smiled as the starlight shone on the smooth and sturdy wood. "This manger is beautiful," she said. And suddenly the first tree knew he was holding the greatest treasure in all the world. One evening, a tired traveler and his friends crowded into an old fishing boat. The traveler fell asleep as the second tree quietly sailed out onto the lake. Soon a thundering, thrashing storm arose. The little tree shuddered. He knew he did not have the strength to carry so many passengers safely through the wind and rain. The tired man awakened. He stood up, stretched out his hand, and said, "Peace!" The storm stopped as quickly as it had begun. And suddenly, the second tree knew he was carrying the King of heaven and earth. One Friday morning, the third tree was startled when her beams were yanked from the forgotten woodpile. She flinched as she was carried through an angry, jeering crowd. She shuddered when soldiers nailed a man's hands to her. She felt ugly and harsh and cruel. But on Sunday morning, when the sun rose and the earth trembled with joy beneath her, the third tree knew that God's love had changed everything. It had made the first tree beautiful. It had made the second tree strong. And every time people thought of the third tree, they would think of God. That was better than being the tallest tree in the world. You know, you and I are just muddling along with these kids. Some of us feel like we're a couple of old wood things that have been dumped in a thing and forgotten. We're an old smelly fishing boat or manger. But you know what? God is doing unbelievable things through you. One day, we're going to be in heaven, and we're going to see what God was able to wring and work through our lives. What a privilege. What a glory. Let us pray. Our Father, thank you that you love us. Thank you that you've called us to this unbelievable calling. We're just old pieces of wood. We've been kind of left forgotten on an old wood pile. But every Sunday morning or Wednesday night or Tuesday or whenever our youth group meets, suddenly those pieces of wood are picked up and somehow you transform us into something that is powerful and good and points to you. Thank you for this great calling. God bless us as we go from here. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. God bless you.